It's a great preface for what we're going to be doing today. I'd like to introduce a person that you all know well. You know, he's a spark plug. He's a stick of dynamite. He has so much enthusiasm, and I don't know where he gets it, because I mean, look at the guy. He's 39 years old, right? So let me introduce Fred Costello.
Thank you very much, Jim. Are we on here? Hear me now? I don't know about being lively after spending the whole day in the sun with everybody. Did you all have a good time?
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to give you a full report the next time. We're on very short timing tonight because of the great debate that's going to go on, and I'm sure everybody's going to be anxious to go hear that. Just a few quick points by way of introduction here, folks. Everybody's all concerned these days about the election in November 6th. Well, we just thought we'd take this time, while everybody's so focused on things, to just bring to your attention an alert. You just got the very brief introduction there. Folks, there's a very, very clear and present danger that we are all under. We don't even know it right now from Agenda 21 that you're going to hear about. So consider this an alert tonight. We are barely scratching the surface of a very broad and deep and complex subject. But we elected to get it started today because if you're wondering what we're going to do after the election, have no doubt about it, you're going to start hearing the beginning of it tonight. We will return to this subject many, many times after this election and be focusing on it quite a bit in 2013. Now, there are several takeaways, hopefully, you're going to take from this particular meeting tonight. First of all is awareness. You're going to become aware, if you're not already, of very clear and present Agenda 21 dangers. That's number one. Second, you're going to have a very, very basic understanding of what some of those dangers are. But the most important thing, fellow patriots, is that you will see how your elected local government officials and representatives are working together as a team for all of us. How about that?
Yeah.
I proudly introduce our panel of guests, our State of Florida Senator Dr. Alan Hayes, who you all know, our Lake County Commissioner Sean Parks, our Lake County School Board father-to-be, Dr. Todd Howard. Just thought I might. And then we have a subject matter expert that is joining us, that's going to guide us, and we will invite you, sir, to come back to us once again, and maybe many more times. And this is Dan Peterson, a genuine subject matter expert. Now, I just want to mention that our State of Florida House of Representatives member, Attorney Larry Metz, sends his regrets to everybody. He was invited, and he said, I would gladly be there, but he had a prior engagement, and he couldn't break it. And Larry and Alan Hayes are working together up there in the legislature, and Alan's going to talk a little bit more about it. Just understand that it's all of your elected officials, and especially at the state level and at the county level. These folks are working together, but please take that away with you tonight. In case you are thinking about what are they doing about it, you're here, you know, you see them. You do know what they're doing about it. Gentlemen, all I have to mention, of course, is that the debates are going to start at 9 o'clock, so we're going to watch our timing here very closely. Dan Peterson will provide a very high-level overview of what Agenda 21 is and who the forces are behind it. Dan has published a lot of information on Agenda 21, and we're going to be putting that on a new section of our website. It's going to be an Agenda 21 section, and a lot of his information and future possibly blogs and what have you, we'll invite you to do that, Dan. So, our first panelist speaker, please help me give a warm Tea Party 912 welcome to Dan Peterson.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. First off, I want to thank the vocalist that started the national anthem, because that's probably the first time I've ever had the opportunity to sing that song where I could get to all those high notes. So thank you very much. That was great. But I represent an organization that's an advocacy group that's called the Coalition for Property Rights. I really believe that those who came to our nation at its founding came here to exercise three rights. Probably the most important right was the right to worship freely. A second right was the right to speak freely. And the third right was the right to own property and to use it for all of its purposes. We have a great Second Amendment, the right to bear arms. That is what enables us to keep in our possession those first three rights that I mentioned. And so the Coalition for Property Rights is solely focused on the property issues, okay? So I want to mention that. Arthur, and on your chairs, I've got our brochure here. You don't have to look at that now, but I just want to draw your attention to it to say that everything I say tonight is on our website, which is called proprights.com. It's listed on the brochure. We consider ourselves to be a movement of property rights advocates, and our mission is to promote and to protect private property rights. What I want to share with you tonight is on the website under a tab that is called the e-library. That means the electronic library. And if you go to that site and you click on e-library, you will see another tab for Agenda 21. And everything that I share with you tonight, I want you to know is taken from first-hand sources. You're not going to be hearing any opinion tonight. This is full knowledge taken from what they say about Agenda 21. And so let's we'll go to the next slide there. If we get, I did want to mention one thing that is important. Arthur Lee was an early colonist back in the 1770s. He said this, that the right of property is the guardian of every other right. And to deprive people of this is, in fact, to deprive them of their liberty. So that's why private property rights are so very, very important. Agenda 21 means it is the agenda for the 21st century, a new global partnership for sustainable development, and it was officially launched publicly in 1992. So what I'm telling you tonight has been in the works for 20 years. This was in a conference called the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro. And this is what they talk about. Sustainable development. It means meeting today's needs without compromising future generations to meet their own needs. And it revolves around these three E's of what they call sustainability. One is environmental sustainability, and you're pretty familiar with what all that is, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But it also involves sustainability regarding the economies of the world. And then finally, there's this other word, equity, which is which is the fairness issue, and social equity. Those are the three E's of sustainability. And in Agenda 21, this is what they say in their preamble, to pull this plan off, and by the way, this is a global plan. Thought I brought a notebook in here I was going to show you. Anyway, I made the mistake of, you can download this plan off of the internet. Oh yeah, could I see that a minute? All of that I'm holding up, that's Agenda 21. If you start to download it, it'll take a couple of days because it's about 400 pages. And while I was at legislative session last year, while I was waiting for bills to come up to be voted on, I decided to read this page per page. So what I'm telling you is from firsthand experience of having actually read Agenda 21. But this is what they say. To pull this plan off, it will require a substantial flow of new and additional resources to developing countries. That sort of begs the question, then where do they come from? Developed countries. Who's the biggest developed country? We are, okay? And it involves a global transfer of wealth, and what they want to do is they want to eradicate poverty, hunger, ill health, and illiteracy. But it goes much deeper than that. Let's hit the, okay. This is a quote that was taken from a predecessor conference to the United Nations. This is all sponsored by the UN. And this is a quote. Land cannot be treated as an ordinary asset controlled by individuals and subject to the pressures and inefficiencies of the market. So if you own property here, it shouldn't be in your control and it shouldn't be subject to market values. The quote continues on, though. Something like that. It gets better. It's quite a lofty quote, as you can see. But private land ownership is also a principal instrument of accumulation and concentration of wealth, and therefore contributes to, gee, where have we heard this word before? Social injustice. And if unchecked, it may become a major obstacle in the planning and implementation of development schemes, meaning sustainable development. Now the best part, and here's why we're talking about this plan. Public control of land use is therefore indispensable to its protection as an asset and the achievement of the long-term objectives of human settlement policies, we'll get into that in a minute, and strategies. So what Agenda 21 says has to happen, there must be a transfer of private property ownership and control into public property ownership and control. Without that, this plan cannot go forward. So that is the foundation of everything in Agenda 21, and that is why it is so dangerous. Now, this is a map that is called the Wildlands Project. What you can't see on here are the black dots that would represent the cities of the urban areas in the United States. But all of this colored area is to be considered wilderness area, owned by government. And here's what they envision. They envision moving everyone into the urban areas, and these are called, in Agenda 21, human settlements. So we're all going to be living in human settlements. And those settlements are going to be mostly mass transit, bicycles, walkability communities, things like that. Retail on ground floors and everyone living in apartments. Around the human settlements, it calls for buffer zones, which are highly regulated and difficult to access for those of us who are living in the human settlements. But the majority of property is called core wilderness. They say it's where man is the visitor. And that's what this is called about. Now, this plan is actually in place. If you take from the Rocky Mountains on to the west, more than half of that land is already owned by government. Here in Florida, more than 40% of our land in this state is owned by government, federal, state, and local governments. So you need to understand this is in place. I want to just briefly mention, I had the opportunity back in another lifetime to spend 14 years of my life living in Moscow, Russia. And back in the days of the Soviet Union and the early development of Russia, this is very much how Russia was laid out. Moscow was a city of 16 million people, not one single dwelling home. Everyone lived in high-rise apartments. Most people traveled by mass transportation. It was incredibly dilapidated. The whole place, take the military hardware away, it was a third world country. And you know what the Communist Party slogan was? You're going to love this. The slogan was the word forward. I'm sure it's a coincidence that we're seeing that these days. Okay, we're going to rush on here because we have a lot to talk about. These are some of the things that the master plan of Agenda 21 called for. First, the shaping of public opinion through Agenda 21 friendly public relations campaigns. Has anyone here ever heard of Earth Day? Yeah. That has been celebrated for how long? I mean, and everywhere around the globe. That is an example of a PR campaign to soften the public so that Agenda 21 could come into our country. Organizing legal mechanisms and regulatory systems to write and pass agenda-friendly laws, ordinances, standards, rules, and regulations. I'll tell you more about that later. Establish agencies to monitor and enforce compliance. That's what the EPA is. That's just what they do. And then we want to teach all personnel and students of public education institutes, colleges, and universities. I did this at a Women's Republican Club a week and a half ago, and the president of the Republican Club at Rollins College, they have at a college like that, isn't that great? He stood up and he said, I want to vouch for that. He said they actually have a degree in sustainable development at Rollins College. You can be. Now that used to be a totally misunderstood word. It wasn't in our vocabulary. Now you can get a degree in it. And it gets worse. Preparing the media, business, industry to accept and promote Agenda 21 friendly concepts and standards. What business do you not know that does not boast that this was printed on recyclable paper and
green technology,
and all of green technology, all of these things? It is here. Now I want to just stop and say, I am all for smart conservation and clean water and clean air and good soil like that man was talking. Who of us doesn't want that? But these are becoming mandates on the public and forcing a change in our lifestyle in our nation. Now, another thing they call for is to train and certify government administrative, planning, and management personnel. After 20 years, it's probably a good bet to say that most of our city managers, most of our planning divisions, a lot of our zoning people, all of that stuff, they have gone through training classes that are and they are certified in sustainable development types of thinking. So it's not just what you do, it's a mindset you develop over time, and this has permeated our society. And then finally, electing and influencing Agenda 21 friendly public officials. Glad we don't have any of those here tonight, but these are people, so they set up the mechanisms, they throw out the proposals for laws, and then they get the people in office who will do this. We'll come back to this. This is the table of contents for Agenda 21, and recently I was reading the Florida Comprehensive State Plan. It almost reads just like this, but you can see just some of the things that they want to do here. Changing consumption patterns, demographics and sustainability, protecting human health. See, health is a part of Agenda 21. It's not just about land. Human settlements, NGOs, those are non-government organizations that carry out that. We'll look at this in a minute. But that's just some of the topics. There are 40 chapters in Agenda 21. That's why it takes so long to get through. And just to show you how serious this is a report card that the UN keeps on the progress of the nations of the world who are trying to implement Agenda 21 thoughts. And it reflects energy, it reflects education, it reflects national plans, about changing consumption habits. There are 33 areas where nations of the world are graded. We get a very good rating, by the way, as you might accept. I know that's small to see and you don't need to read it all, but just to show you, these people are really serious and they have been for 20 years. Now, the thing we notice most about when we think about Agenda 21, if you've ever heard about that, there's this PR campaign out there called global warming, and that's part of the Save the Earth, and we have to reduce all of our carbon emissions, things like that. But what you don't know about is what follows that. There is a global support network that has been built out for some time and continues to grow. It starts with a governance system of regional councils. And this is the way they operate. They set up regional councils that set policy, and then they put the governments, the elected officials, in the positions of just implementing what they decide to do. Now, I saw this, by the way, in the Soviet Union as well. The Soviet Union had a beautiful constitution. It had an elected parliament. Of course, there was only one candidate running for each seat, but it was an elected parliament. And they have all the trappings of that. But all the policies were set by the Politburo through regional groups of what we call, it was kind of like our Senate. And those regional groups around Russia and those countries, they set the policy, and then the governments simply implemented the policy. And that's where this goes. By the way, just a little Russian lesson. You can't imagine. When I say the word council, you know what the Russian translation of that is? Soviet. So a council is what they call a Soviet, Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. So it was the union of all these republics, 15, and they were all run by these councils. Okay. Second thing that's already out there, and you've heard of these things, maybe you didn't know they were all connected, financial networks, the World Bank, International Monetary Fund. Another thing, there's a trade network, World Trade Organization. I mean, think about it. If wealth and products are going to be redistributed around the world, somebody has to keep that organized and controlled and coordinated. And then there's a whole system of jurisprudence to punish those of us who maybe emit too many carbon, too large of a carbon footprint, and that is the World Court. And I'll tell you what, they are working actually to set up a global EPA, and if a nation of the world fails to comply, they can be fined. That's one way of extracting wealth, and then they will give it to whomever they want. And then this is another thing. There's an organization that is creating mandated standards that's called the System of Environmental Economic Accounts. And they decide how much carbon you can emit, and then they go after the people who need to be assessed a fine or something like that. And then underlying and tying all of this together is a system of data collection, They're always doing data collection, gathering information and technology. 4 reasons why none of us really knew about this. All right, and this is kind of the conclusion here, and then we'll open it up for panel and questions and answers. First, George Bush, our president, George H.W. Bush, went down to Rio and actually signed this treaty in 1992. He called it a New World Order at that time, but it wasn't a hard treaty that had to be approved or debated in our Congress, and so it never was. But then along came President Bill Clinton, and in 1993, through an executive order, boy, didn't that start a pattern? But through an executive order, he established the President's Council for Sustainability, and that included more than half of his cabinet and some 17 or 18 other cross-section of leaders in the United States, and they began to implement sustainable development in our nation. So that's why we didn't know about it. It was an executive order. Again, it was never debated or presented to our Congress. Third reason why we don't know much about this is it's never implemented officially by government. They work through non-government organizations and non-profits to do all the research and implement all these laws. The most famous one of them is this one that's called ICLEI, and that stands for the International Council of Local Environmental Initiatives. And here's the pattern. That name has more to say than you might think. Local Environmental Initiatives. This global organization gets huge grants from from the UN, but also actually from our government. They recently got $13 billion in stimulus funds to do some projects. It's on their website. Everything I'm telling you is fully documented. But it's local initiatives, and they work at the local level, the city and the county level, to institute these regulations and these laws and all the things that cost us so much money. Now, in the United States, they have 550 member cities and counties. Among those in Florida were Tallahassee, Orlando. I don't know if you read the news article. Buddy Dyer recently did a State of the City where he announced he's going to make it the green city of the United States, and it's all sustainable development stuff. I'm going to write a newsletter about that one soon. But Miami-Dade County is an incredible hotbed for this. The clerk of courts in Miami-Dade County is the vice, or at least he was the vice president of ICLEI. So he's out there. Around the world, they have more than 1,200 participating cities. A couple of others that you may or may not have heard about, the American Planning Association. When Bill Clinton established his President's Council, they gave money in the millions of dollars to that organization to write a manual on how to introduce legislation and regulations that would pull off sustainable development. U.S. Green Building Council puts out all kinds of things. You know, LEED, you've maybe seen that, with the electrical and water usage and stuff like that. It's a global organization. It's huge. Here's the fourth reason none of us really have done it, because it's never called Agenda 21. There's a whole jargon that goes with Agenda 21 that you have to know about. Once you know these words, your ears and eyes are going to perk up. Here's a quote. This is a guy named Gary Lawrence. He was an advisor to President Clinton's Sustainable Development Council. He was giving a lecture at a UN conference in the UK, and this was 1997, I believe. And he was giving a lecture on how to get people elected who had a sustainable development mindset. But here's what he told his audience. I'm just going to read this because it's so long. But he said this: participating in a UN-advocated planning process would very likely bring out the conspiracy-fixated groups and individuals of our society. Anybody know what that is? This segment of our society, who fear one world government and a UN invasion of the United States through which our individual freedom would be stripped away, would actively work to defeat any elected official who joined the conspiracy by undertaking Local Agenda 21. So, we call our process something else like comprehensive planning, growth management, and smart growth. Our whole state is built on comprehensive planning, and most states, and a lot of our nation, is built on comprehensive growth. So these are some of the reasons. Let me show some of these words. These are just some of the buzzwords within the sustainable development community. You know, things like mass transit and, you know, consensus. That's a dangerous one. So those are the 4 reasons why we don't know about it. Instead of coming in with a big program that came down through government, they went out, not covertly, but they just went out quietly and lit 1,000 fires across the United States. And now we're living with those consequences. And if we don't start to backtrack some of this, it's going to bankrupt us. It's going to rob us of our freedoms. So, again, keep in mind that private property shouldn't be in individual hands, and they want to take all private property and put it into the public domain so they can put this plan together. Sorry we don't have time to do more, but that is the guts. If you want to see the rest of this and read, again, under the e-library on the Coalition for PropRights.com, there's an executive summary. It's in speech form, and the PowerPoint is there. You could go out and give this speech to anybody. You could take this into your local elected officials, talk to anyone and everyone about it, and it's all free. Just download it off the website, okay? All right. That's all I have. Thank you.